Welcome back, everyone. Pal Pondron Weather here. Hoping everyone out there is enjoying your Memorial Weekend. We got a lot to cover in this update, so let's get right to it and delve into the details and start off with the overall water vapor imagery. You can actually see we've got a lot of convection off the coast of the Carolinas. That's compliments of a little low pressure center that's off the southeast coast. That's bringing some heavier rains, and that's just going to kind of sit and spin over the coming days. At the same time, we've got a ridging over the top with more of a Rex blocking type setup, and that's a lot of sinking air, a lot of heat, and that shifts all the way down into the Midwest. And then in the middle of the country, we've got a persistent subtropical jet that feeds in tropical type moisture. We've got a lot of lift across the Great Plains, and we see these diurnal heating type thunderstorms that produce strong to severe thunderstorms, and then has a lot of lightning with it, large hail with it as too, damaging winds, some tornadic activity. Those feed into the evening time frame and they tend to die off into the overnight, and then they just kind of reform again the next day. And we've seen this kind of persistent cycle, and that looks to continue at least in the coming days. So let's take a look and take you back over the last 30 days on some of these precipitation anomalies. And you can see from the drought index across the U.S., we've needed a lot of help in Florida. We got it in a big way in the last 30 days, especially across Texas and across these areas across the Great Plains. Kind of a good sign you're seeing a lot of this rain activity, and that looks to continue. And where you see all the kind of the sinking air in the brown shaded areas, that is the much drier air, and that's with high pressure overhead. And we've seen a good chunk of that across the Midwest and the Ohio Valley and a good part of the Mid-Atlantic regions, and as well as out west as well. And if we take a look at the setup going forward, so we've got kind of a persistent subtropical jet stream that is complements of that building El Nino that we've been talking about. We've got a low pressure center. That is your lift mechanism, and this is your tropical feed. So there's your overall setup. And look what's right there off the southeast coast. Yeah, that's 1,004 millibar, folks. That's your non-tropical low out there. We've had tropical type systems with even higher millibars than this, but nonetheless, that's what the National Hurricane Center has it right now, 0% of forming over the next couple of hours. But nonetheless, whether it gets named or not, it's definitely going to bring some heavier rains into the region. Let's take a look at this non-tropical low, folks. This is your latest satellite picture. That's a pretty good, this is a lot of spin to it. It's just right off the coast. Those waters are fairly warm for this time of year. That was that ridge that formed over the top with that Rex blocking pattern complements of that stalled frontal boundary. That lowered the pressures. That spun up this little non-tropical low down here. And that is just kind of sitting and spinning. And that's just going to be drifting towards the coast, and eventually going to be making it inland, but that's probably not going to be until late Sunday, heading into Monday time frame. But look at the winds. These are your latest updates on your winds, your wind gusts, some upwards to almost 30 miles an hour inland, but there's a 40 to 50 mile per hour gust just right off shore. So yeah, it's definitely has signs of, kind of feeling like a little low end tropical type system down there. And so expect some heavier winds, especially along the coastal regions, and then heavier rains going inland for the coming Memorial Weekend. And if you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns, hit the subscribe button and you're in. You get all my daily content on this channel. It's also important to hit the like button as well. It definitely helps out more than you know. So let's take a look at that. That's 0%, guys. This is the latest update from the National Hurricane Center. That's that non-tropical low down there. But nonetheless, very disorganized type shower activity. That's going to be moving inland and going to be dumping some heavier rains over the coming days. But there's the severe weather setup across the Great Plains. There's that low pressure center that we showed you off into Colorado. That's the lift mechanism, complements with the subtropical type feed off the Pacific there, and that's going to be fueling the fire across New Mexico, across eastern portions of Colorado there, and to eastern portions of Wyoming. This area of activity is going to blow up into the heat of the afternoon, 4, 5, 6 o'clock, and then some of those could be large hail producers, damaging winds, a lot of lightning with them. And that will be a kind of a repeated type setup heading into Sunday. So kind of the same areas that we've seen as of late get lit up across the middle of the country with that just more active, persistent subtropical type feed. But notice the rest of the country, there's not much rain to speak of. It's only right here along the Carolina coast, back into Virginia. That could sneak into portions of West Virginia, heading in deeper into Sunday. But that's all the activity. It's right there along the coastal region with that area low pressure. Here's your latest 48-hour precipitation, where it's going to fall just in the next 2 days for your Saturday and your Sunday time frame. All the areas in white basically don't get a drop of rain. These areas down here into portions of the Carolinas and to Virginia, portions of West Virginia, get 1 to 3 inches of rain. And a lot of these areas along the coast, maybe 4 to 5 inches of rain. But then the middle of the country, you get inundated with that persistent subtropical southwest flow. And then some of these features could break off with diurnal type heating and start shifting a little bit further off to the east as we get deeper into Sunday, and might have some, afternoon type rain showers into portions of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, about 30% coverage. And then going forward, there's your Memorial Day, right? So we've got this persistent subtropical type jet that pulls in some cooler and more unsettled type weather across the southern plains here, across the southern regions. But over the top, you've got that ridging of high pressure, plenty of heat building over the top, and there's that type of Rex blocking pattern that's been persistent. Was kind of a mega block, and then it transferred to more of a Rex block that will try to break down a little bit. But nonetheless, this is where the heat is over Canada, and that drapes across the Great Lakes and gets into portions of the Midwest. And those areas are really going to be heating up as we get into the first couple of days of June. But there's your Memorial setup. So we've got that low pressure right off the coast, right? That's where all the heavier rain is going to be. But in the middle of the country, we are going to see a little subtle shift with that Rex blocking pattern kind of breaking down a little bit. That's going to allow more of the subtropical feed off the coast here to push further east and get some of these areas and portions of eastern North Dakota, South Dakota, portions of North Texas, into portions of East Texas to get in with some of the rain opportunities. Again, about 30 to 40% during daytime type heating, but at least you could see a shower and thunderstorm, nothing to ruin your Memorial plans. But nonetheless, you could see an afternoon pop-up thunderstorm. And if you get one overhead, these have light steering currents, right? And there's very light winds aloft. They could be some heavier downpours in a short amount of time, and very isolated pockets of flash flooding could be likely in some of these areas with these quick, very high water content, latent type, summertime type thunderstorms. And so here's the setup going forward. They're going into Tuesday to kind of, as we head towards the end of May, you can see the vorticities, right? So we've got one off the West Coast. We've got another one that's draped across Texas. These are your kind of your lift mechanisms. There's that low right there. This is Tuesday. You notice where it doesn't really go anywhere. And then there's also another area of convection that's going to be diving into portions of New England. That's going to bring a little bit more unsettled weather and more, rain showers for them, and pushing that high pressure a little bit further into the into the upper Midwest. So if we take a look at the setup heading into your Tuesday timeframe on the surface map, you can actually see that with the breakdown of the pulling of the ridge over the top that pushes further south, and that's really going to be locked over to the upper Midwest. More sinking air, drier conditions. That soil is really going to be drying out in a big way. But again, you can see the shift, right? You can see the shift a little bit further off into the east. So now areas and portions of Minnesota is going to get into the rain activity heading into Tuesday as we close out May. But as we start June, so there's the ridge. So the ridge is really going to be building over the top. We could be even look at some record high temperatures by the time we get, say, into that second, maybe that third time frame of June. Let's take a look at some of these temperatures. So this is actually for next Friday. That this is around June 3rd, June 2nd time frame. Those are widespread 90s, folks, across the upper Midwest here, across Illinois, even 94 in some of these areas. And look at Phoenix. I mean, you know that's a heat wave when you're basically the same temperature in Illinois that you are in Phoenix here. And then there's the East Coast, right? With the only the cold pool really setting up over Maine, that squeezes and presses the ridge further south, and some of these areas could be well into the 90-degree mark up there for the Northeast coast, and that's obviously plenty warm for them for this time of year. But look what happens with this, this building of the ridge and the just continued dry spell across the Midwest. That's a rapid onset of drought risk across these areas once we move into that first week of June. So it's a compounding situation, folks. Obviously, if you don't get rain in an area and you get heat, it doesn't take much to dry out those soils. And so, yeah, some of these areas could be looking at some, drought prone conditions starting to feed into these areas. And this could be fairly persistent, as we head into deeper into your summer, time frame. So, but yeah, going forward, if we take a look at the overall setup, again, by the 3rd, there's where you have your record high temperatures over the top, plenty of heat building, and it's nothing but that with this more active subtropical jet stream. So our southern branch of the jet stream continues to remain active, and these areas continue to remain either average or just kind of slightly below average, as we start June. So it's going to be feeling really nice down here across these southern regions, because obviously these areas have been well into the hundreds in a lot of years, and they're going to see everything but that. Some of these areas don't even get out of the 80s as we head into the first week of June. And then there's your lift mechanisms as we go into your next Saturday time frame. So I think these areas across the middle of the country continued to remain on the wetter side. And then you can see that low pressure, it finally kind of just drifts off into Florida. And then that adds more shower activity for them as we head into next weekend. But across the middle of the country, I think northwest flow will be starting to come back. We've got the ridge out here across the Midwest. We're going to have this subtropical jet continue to remain alive and active. We got these low pressure centers that come off the West Coast, and then we're going to have this persistent kind of northwest flow. So these are in areas that could be seeing above average rainfall by the time we get into your, say, June 3rd to June 6th, more or less next weekend. These areas across the middle of the country, across portions of Oklahoma, maybe deeper, more areas into Texas, like places like into East Texas, North Texas, maybe even parts of Arkansas could finally start and get into the action with a little bit more, certainty of that northwest flow forming. Storms will still form off the Rockies, and then they will be diving southeast into the overnight hours, and those typically might pull in outflow boundaries out ahead of them to kind of keep them alive during the overnight time frame. So you see this in more of a kind of a June setup. So this is typically what we would see kind of this time of year going into your June type setups with these kind of persistent, more northwest flow type of events. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video and definitely hit the subscribe button and catch the next update while I protect you before and after storm.